Our street had always felt like the kind of place you'd see in a magazine spread. Perfectly manicured lawns, friendly waves from the neighbors, and the kind of tranquility you dream about when starting a family. Lisa and I moved here 7 years ago, just before our son, Ethan, was born. Over time, we built a routine, a comfortable life surrounded by people who felt more like extended family than strangers. At the heart of that little circle were Sarah and James, our neighbors to the left. They'd lived there longer than we had, always ready with a warm smile or an invitation to a backyard cookout. Lisa bonded with Sarah almost immediately. They were like sisters, spending afternoons chatting over coffee or planning elaborate holiday decorations for the block. I liked James, too. He was laid back, easy to talk to, and we shared the same sense of humor. Life felt easy, predictable, and safe. But life has a way of surprising you when you least expect it. Looking back, I should have noticed the change sooner. It started small, little things that were easy to brush off. Lisa spent more time next door with Sarah, helping her with the garden or planning neighborhood events. I didn't think much of it at first. They were best friends, after all, and Lisa loved being involved in the community. But then came the excuses. Mark, Sarah needs help rearranging her patio furniture, can you handle dinner tonight? Or, James is out of town, and Sarah doesn't feel safe alone. I'm going to keep her company for a while. At first, I shrugged it off. Lisa had always been compassionate, and Sarah had been there for us countless times. But as the weeks passed, her absences grew longer, her explanations vaguer. The easy rhythm of our lives began to feel off. One evening, as Lisa headed out the door with a Tupperware container full of brownies, I asked casually, "You're spending a lot of time with Sarah these days. Everything okay?" She hesitated, her hand lingering on the doorknob. "Yeah, of course," she said, her tone a little too bright. "She's just been going through a lot, you know. I'm trying to be a good friend." I nodded, forcing a smile. "That's nice of you." But the unease in my chest didn't fade. A week later, I came home early from work, hoping to surprise Lisa with dinner. Ethan was at a friend's house, so the house was unusually quiet. As I set the grocery bags on the counter, I noticed Lisa's phone buzzing on the kitchen island. A message popped up on the screen. "Can't wait to see you later. Let's make up for last time." The sender's name was saved as Sarah. My stomach sank. I stared at the message, my mind racing. It was possible that it was innocent, a joke, a misunderstanding. But the tone of the message didn't sit right with me. It was playful, intimate in a way that didn't feel like something between two friends. When Lisa came home an hour later, I didn't mention it. I told myself I was overreacting, that I needed more than one cryptic message to jump to conclusions. But the doubt had been planted, and it grew with every passing day. Over the next few weeks, I started paying closer attention. Lisa's phone was never far from her hand, and she seemed to get more texts than usual. Whenever I glanced her way, she'd quickly lock the screen or put the phone face down. She was distracted during dinner, distant when we talked, and she always had an excuse to leave the house. "Sarah's got a leaky faucet. I'll be right back. James is working late, so Sarah asked me to help her prep for the block party." The explanations were endless, but the pattern was clear. Lisa was spending more time at Sarah's house than our own. One evening, after Lisa left for yet another quick visit, I decided to take a walk. I told myself I needed some air, but in truth, I was hoping to get a glimpse of what was really going on. As I passed Sarah's house, I saw the curtains in the living room drawn tightly shut, the faint glow of a television flickering inside. I paused, straining to hear anything, but the street was quiet, save for the distant hum of crickets. Just as I was about to move on, I saw a shadow pass by the window, a figure I didn't recognize. It wasn't Lisa or Sarah. It was a man. I stood frozen on the sidewalk, my heart pounding. The figure in Sarah's living room was definitely a man, tall, broad-shouldered, and entirely unfamiliar. My mind raced with possibilities. Was this James? No, it couldn't be, he was supposed to be out of town. And why would Lisa be here if James was home? I walked back to my house, my unease growing with every step. When Lisa returned an hour later, her face flushed and her smile unusually bright, I couldn't bring myself to ask her about it. Instead, I pretended everything was fine, even as the knot in my stomach tightened. Over the next few days, I kept replaying that moment in my mind. Lisa continued her frequent visits to Sarah's house, but now I noticed things I hadn't before, the way she dressed a little nicer than usual, how she seemed more secretive about her plans. One evening, as Lisa sat scrolling on her phone, I casually asked, "How's Sarah holding up? She seems to need a lot of help lately." Lisa didn't look up. "Oh, she's fine. Just stressed with James being gone so much." I said, feigning disinterest. "Doesn't she have anyone else to help her out?" Lisa's fingers paused over her phone, just for a second, before she resumed scrolling. "Not really." "Why?" "No reason," I said, watching her carefully. That slight hesitation was all I needed to confirm my suspicions. Something was going on, and it wasn't innocent. The next day, I decided to take matters into my own hands. While Lisa was at work, I stopped by Sarah's house under the pretense of borrowing a tool. She answered the door, her smile warm but slightly nervous. "Mark." "What a surprise," she said, her voice just a little too chipper. "Hey, Sarah," I said, stepping inside. "I was wondering if you had a wrench I could borrow. My toolbox seems to have grown legs." "Of course," she said quickly. "Let me grab it for you." As she disappeared into the garage, I glanced around the house. Everything seemed normal, neatly decorated, faint traces of vanilla from a candle burning on the counter. But then I noticed something out of place, a jacket draped over the back of a chair. It was a man's jacket, one I didn't recognize. Before I could examine it further, Sarah returned, holding a wrench. "Here you go," she said, her smile tight. "Thanks," I said, taking it. I hesitated, then added casually, "By the way, I saw someone at your house the other night." "A tall guy. Was that James?" Her smile faltered for a split second before she recovered. "Oh, no. That was a friend of mine. He was just helping me with some things while James is away." "Got it," I said, nodding. "Well, thanks for this. I'll get it back to you soon." As I left, her unease was palpable, and it only fueled my determination to get to the bottom of this. That evening, I decided to check Lisa's phone. I knew it was an invasion of privacy, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being lied to. When she left her phone unattended in the kitchen, I unlocked it and went straight to her messages with Sarah. What I found confirmed my worst fears. The messages between Lisa and Sarah weren't just friendly chats, they were coded, filled with references to meetings and plans that didn't make sense. But what really caught my attention was a thread with an unsaved number. The conversation was recent, the tone playful and flirtatious. "When can I see you again?" "Soon. I'll make an excuse to head over. You're worth the risk." My blood ran cold. This wasn't just a suspicion anymore, it was real. That night, as Lisa and I sat in the living room, I couldn't hold back any longer. "Lisa," I began, my voice steady. "I need to ask you something." She looked up from her phone, her smile faltering. "What is it? Who's the guy?" I asked bluntly. Her expression froze. "What are you talking about?" "I saw a man at Sarah's house the other night," I said, leaning forward. "And I've seen your messages, Lisa. Don't lie to me." Her face drained of color, and for a moment, she didn't say anything. Then she whispered, "Mark, Don't," I interrupted, my voice rising. "Don't insult me by pretending there's an explanation. Just tell me the truth. Her eyes filled with tears, and she buried her face in her hands. I'm so sorry, she sobbed. It's not what you think. Then what is it? I demanded, my chest tightening. Because it sure looks like you've been lying to me. She looked up, her face streaked with tears. It's James. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. James. I repeated, my voice trembling. Sarah's husband. Are you serious? She nodded, fresh tears streaming down her face. It was a mistake, Mark. I didn't mean for it to happen. Lisa's confession hung in the air, suffocating and unbearable. James. Of all people, it had to be James, the man I'd trusted as a friend, a neighbor, almost like family. The man I'd shared beers with in my backyard while our kids played together. The betrayal wasn't just Lisa's, it was his too. How long has this been going on? I asked, my voice barely steady. Lisa wiped at her face, avoiding my gaze. A few months. A few months. I repeated, my anger rising. So every time you went to Sarah's, every excuse you made, was it him you were meeting? Her silence was all the answer I needed. The days that followed were a blur of anger, sadness, and disbelief. Lisa tried to explain, to justify her actions, but her words only deepened the wound. It started when you were working late, she said one evening, her voice trembling. I felt neglected. And James was there. He listened to me, made me feel seen. And what about Sarah? I snapped. Did you ever think about what this would do to her? Or to me? Or to our family? I didn't mean for it to go this far, she said, tears streaming down her face. It was a mistake, Mark. I swear it's over. But how could I believe her? Every word felt hollow, every promise tainted by the weight of her betrayal. I couldn't let this go without confronting James. The next day, I waited until Lisa was out of the house and walked next door. My hands were shaking as I knocked on the door, my anger simmering just below the surface. James opened the door, his face registering shock and then guilt when he saw me. Mark, he said, his voice strained. I didn't expect. Cut the crap, I interrupted, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. We need to talk. He closed the door, his shoulders slumping. I guess Lisa told you. You're damn right she did, I said, my voice rising. How could you do this, James? To me? To Sarah? He ran a hand through his hair, his face pale. I'm sorry, Mark. I don't know what to say. Sorry. I spat. You're sorry. You betrayed your wife. You betrayed me. You destroyed everything. I didn't mean for this to happen, he said weakly. It just happened. That's not an excuse, I snapped. You made a choice, James. Both of you did. He didn't respond, his silence only fueling my anger. I turned and walked out, slamming the door behind me. Later that evening, Sarah showed up at my house, her face pale and her eyes red from crying. Mark, she said, her voice trembling. I need to talk to you. I let her in, my heart sinking as I braced for what she had to say. James told me everything, she said, her voice breaking. I don't even know where to start. I'm sorry, Sarah, I said, my anger softening in the face of her pain. I didn't want you to find out like this. She shook her head, tears streaming down her face. How could they do this to us? We trusted them. We built a life together. I wish I had an answer, I said quietly. But all I know is that everything feels broken. Over the next few weeks, Lisa tried everything to make amends. She attended counseling sessions, opened up about her feelings, and promised over and over that the affair was over. But trust isn't something you can rebuild with words alone. The scars of her betrayal ran deep, and I wasn't sure if I could ever forgive her. One evening, as we sat on the porch after putting the kids to bed, she looked at me with tears in her eyes. "Mark, I love you," she said softly. "I know I've hurt you in ways I can't take back, but I want to fight for us. For our family." I stared at her, my emotions a tangled mess of anger, sadness, and faint hope. "I don't know if I can do this, Lisa," I said finally. "But for the kids, I'm willing to try." Her face lit up with a mix of relief and gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered. "I'll do whatever it takes." The road to healing was long and uncertain. Counseling sessions became a regular part of our lives, and Lisa worked hard to rebuild the trust she had shattered. But the pain of her betrayal lingered, and the memories of her affair with James were never far from my mind. As for Sarah, she filed for divorce, cutting James out of her life for good. Our friendship would never be the same, but there was a strange sense of solidarity in our shared pain. The days after my conversation with Sarah were heavy. My home, my marriage, my friendships, everything felt fragile, like a house of cards teetering on the edge of collapse. Lisa was trying. I couldn't deny that. She threw herself into counseling, opened up about her mistakes, and made an effort to rebuild what we'd lost. But the damage ran deep. Our first joint counseling session was tense. The therapist, a calm and composed woman named Dr. Hughes, began by asking us to share why we were there. "I want to fix what I've broken," Lisa said, her voice trembling. "I know I hurt Mark, and I'll do whatever it takes to make this right." I looked at her, my emotions a mix of anger and sadness. "I'm here because I need answers," I said bluntly. "I need to understand why she thought this was okay, how she could do this to me, to us." Dr. Hughes nodded, her expression empathetic. "Trust is the foundation of any relationship, and when it's broken, rebuilding takes time. But before you can rebuild, you need to address the pain. Mark, what do you need from Lisa right now?" I hesitated, the words caught in my throat. Finally, I said, "I need honesty. And I need time." Lisa nodded quickly, her eyes filled with tears. "I'll give you both. Whatever you need, Mark." The hardest part of all this wasn't the pain Lisa caused me, it was seeing how her actions rippled through our family. Ethan, too young to understand the details, could sense the tension between us. He'd started asking questions, his wide eyes filled with confusion. "Dad, are you and Mom mad at each other?" he asked one evening as I tucked him into bed. I forced a smile, brushing his hair back. "Sometimes grown-ups go through tough times," I said carefully. "But no matter what happens, we both love you very much." He nodded, his expression serious. "Okay. I love you and Mom too." His words hit me like a punch to the gut. No matter how angry I was at Lisa, I couldn't let that anger destroy what we'd built for Ethan. One afternoon, while Lisa was at work, my phone buzzed with an incoming call from Sarah. I hesitated before answering, unsure of what she could possibly want to say. "Hi, Mark," she said, her voice tentative. "I just wanted to check in. See how you're holding up." "I'm managing," I said, my tone guarded. "What about you?" "It's been hard," she admitted. "I'm moving forward with the divorce. James is staying with a friend while I figure out what to do next." "I'm sorry," I said, meaning it. "You deserve better." "So do you," she said softly. There was a pause before she added, "If you ever need someone to talk to, I'm here." "Thanks," I said, though I wasn't sure if reaching out to Sarah would help or hurt. Still, her support felt genuine, and for that, I was grateful. That evening, Lisa suggested we take Ethan to the park, something we hadn't done as a family in months. Watching Ethan race across the playground, his laughter ringing out, I felt a small flicker of hope. For a moment, it was almost like old times. As we sat on a bench, Lisa turned to me. "Thank you for coming," she said softly. I know things are still hard, but this means a lot to me. I'm trying, I said honestly. But it's going to take time. I know, she said, her eyes filled with determination. And I'll keep trying, too. One night, during a particularly raw counseling session, Dr. Hughes asked me a question that stopped me in my tracks. Mark, what does forgiveness mean to you? I thought about it, my mind racing. It's not about forgetting, I said finally. It's about letting go of the anger. But I don't know if I'm ready for that yet. That's okay, Dr. Hughes said gently. Forgiveness is a process, not a destination. The fact that you're here, working through this, shows that you're open to the possibility. Her words stayed with me long after the session ended. Forgiveness felt like an impossible mountain to climb, but maybe, just maybe, I could take the first step. Over the following weeks, Lisa and I found moments of calm amidst the chaos. We started having dinner together as a family, going on walks, and talking about things other than the affair. The wounds were still there, but they didn't feel as raw. Slowly, tentatively, we were finding our way back to each other. But the road ahead was long, and I wasn't sure where it would lead. The weeks that followed were a delicate balancing act. Lisa's efforts to rebuild trust were genuine. She attended every counseling session, gave me full transparency with her phone and whereabouts, and made every effort to prioritize our family. But the scars of her betrayal were deep, and I wasn't sure if they could ever fully heal. One Saturday morning, Sarah knocked on our door. I hesitated before answering, unsure of what she could want. When I opened the door, her expression was somber but determined. "Hi, Mark," she said. "Do you have a minute?" Lisa was upstairs with Ethan, so I stepped outside, closing the door behind me. "What is it, Sarah?" "I just wanted to say thank you," she began, her voice steady. "For how you handled everything. I know this hasn't been easy for you, or for me. But I'm glad we can be civil." I nodded, unsure of what to say. Sarah had always been kind, and despite everything, I couldn't bring myself to blame her for what James and Lisa had done. "How are you holding up?" I asked. She shrugged, a sad smile crossing her face. "Better, I guess. I've started filing for divorce. James is staying with a friend, and I'm focusing on myself." "That's probably for the best," I said. "You deserve better than what he gave you." "So do you," she replied, her tone earnest. "Don't let Lisa off the hook too easily, Mark. Make sure she earns it." Her words lingered long after she left. Lisa had been trying, but was it enough? Could she ever truly earn back my trust? One evening, as Ethan and I played board games in the living room, he looked up at me with wide, curious eyes. "Dad, why do you and Mom talk to Dr. Hughes?" The question caught me off guard. "Well," I began carefully, "sometimes grown-ups need help working through tough times." "Are you and Mom okay?" he asked, his voice soft. I forced a smile, ruffling his hair. "We're trying, buddy. We both love you very much, and we're doing everything we can to make sure you're happy." He nodded, seemingly satisfied with my answer, but his question stayed with me. Lisa and I weren't the only ones affected by her choices. Ethan deserved parents who could either fix their marriage or walk away with dignity. A few nights later, Lisa and I had another counseling session. Dr. Hughes asked us to write letters to each other, honest, unfiltered letters about how we felt and what we wanted. Lisa's letter was heartfelt and raw. She apologized for everything, expressed her love for me, and begged for a chance to prove she could be the partner I deserved. But my letter was more conflicted. I wrote about my anger, my pain, and my uncertainty about whether we could ever truly move forward. When I read it aloud, Lisa's face crumpled, and she began to cry. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice shaking. "I don't know how to fix this, Mark. But I want to. I love you." Dr. Hughes intervened, her voice calm. Mark, do you believe Lisa is sincere in her efforts? I hesitated, then nodded. Yes. I think she is. And do you believe you can eventually forgive her? I don't know, I admitted. I want to, but I'm not there yet. That's okay, Dr. Hughes said gently. Forgiveness takes time. The fact that you're here, willing to work through this, is a step in the right direction. Later that night, as Lisa and I sat together on the couch, I looked at her and said, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest. Of course, she said, her voice trembling. Why did you do it? I asked. What made you think turning to James was the answer? She took a deep breath, her hands twisting in her lap. I was lonely, she admitted. We were drifting apart, and I didn't know how to fix it. James was there, and I made a terrible mistake. But it wasn't because I didn't love you, Mark. I did, and I still do. Her honesty caught me off guard. For the first time, I felt like I was hearing the truth, not an excuse, but an admission of her flaws. It didn't erase the pain, but it gave me a glimmer of understanding. The next morning, I woke up early and sat on the porch, watching the sunrise. The question I'd been avoiding for weeks finally demanded an answer: could I truly forgive Lisa and rebuild our marriage? As I sat there, I thought about Ethan, about the life we'd built, and about the woman Lisa had been before all of this. She wasn't perfect, neither was I, but she was trying. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. When Lisa came outside a few minutes later, her expression cautious, I looked at her and said, I'm willing to keep trying. But this only works if we're both all in. Her eyes filled with tears, and she nodded quickly. I'm all in, Mark. I promise. Rebuilding wouldn't be easy, but for the first time, I felt like it was possible. The scars of Lisa's betrayal would never fully fade, but maybe they didn't have to. Maybe they could serve as a reminder of how far we'd come, and how much we were willing to fight for what mattered. His decision to stay and try to rebuild our marriage was just the beginning. Lisa and I had taken a fragile first step toward healing, but the path ahead was far from easy. Trust wasn't something that could be restored overnight, and every day brought new challenges. Dr. Hughes became a central figure in our lives. Counseling sessions shifted from addressing the past to focusing on how to move forward. One session, in particular, stood out. Mark, Dr. Hughes said, leaning forward, what does trust look like for you now? I hesitated, thinking carefully. It's consistency, I said finally. I need to see that Lisa means what she says. That her actions match her words. Lisa nodded, her expression serious. I understand. And I'll do whatever it takes to show you that I'm committed. Dr. Hughes turned to Lisa. And what do you need from Mark? Lisa's voice trembled as she said, I need to know that he's willing to let me try. I know I've broken his heart, but I need to feel like there's a chance we can rebuild. Her words hit me hard. She was right. If I wanted this to work, I had to let go of some of the bitterness and give her a real chance. We began to find a new rhythm, taking small steps toward normalcy. Family dinners became a nightly ritual again, and we started going on walks together after Ethan went to bed. Lisa made an effort to include me in her day-to-day life, sharing her schedule and keeping her phone unlocked. At first, it felt awkward, like we were strangers trying to relearn each other. But over time, the walls between us began to lower, bit by bit. One evening, as we sat on the couch watching a movie, Lisa leaned her head on my shoulder. Thank you, she said softly. For what? I asked. For giving me another chance, she said, her voice trembling. I know it's not easy. It's not, I admitted. But I think we're making progress. Her smile was small but genuine, and for the first time in months, I felt a flicker of hope. Ethan seemed to sense the shift in our home. He was happier, more at ease, and his questions about Lisa and me stopped. Seeing him laugh and play like he used to reminded me of why I was fighting for our family. It wasn't just about Lisa and me, it was about giving Ethan the stability he deserved. One afternoon, as we watched Ethan kick a soccer ball in the yard, Lisa turned to me. "He's so resilient," she said, her voice filled with emotion. "I'm so grateful he has you." "We're both here for him," I said, though her words warmed me. "That's what matters." One evening, Lisa told me she needed to stay late at work to prepare for a gallery opening. My chest tightened at the familiar excuse, memories of her past lies flooding back. But instead of letting the doubt consume me, I asked, "Do you want me to pick you up afterward?" Her eyes widened slightly, and then she nodded. "I'd like that." Later that night, when I arrived at the gallery, I saw her talking to her colleagues, her expression animated as she gestured toward a new exhibit. She looked up and smiled when she saw me, walking over to greet me with a kiss on the cheek. "Thanks for coming," she said, her eyes filled with gratitude. In that moment, I realized that trust wasn't just about her actions, it was about my willingness to believe in her efforts. And tonight, she'd proven she was trying. Forgiveness didn't come in a single moment, but in a series of small, quiet realizations. Like when Lisa took Ethan to the park so I could have some time to myself, or when she spent hours planning a surprise birthday dinner for me. Each gesture felt like a brick in the foundation we were trying to rebuild. One night, as we sat on the porch after a long day, I turned to her and said, "I think I'm starting to let go of the anger." Her eyes filled with tears, and she reached for my hand. "Thank you," she whispered. "That means everything to me." Our journey was far from over, but for the first time in months, I felt like we were on solid ground. The pain of Lisa's betrayal would never fully disappear, but we were learning how to move forward, together. As I sat with Lisa on the porch, watching the stars, I felt a fragile sense of peace. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours. And that was enough. Rebuilding a marriage after betrayal isn't a straight line. Some days felt hopeful, like we were rediscovering what made us fall in love in the first place. Other days were marked by setbacks, where the weight of what Lisa had done threatened to pull us under. But we kept moving forward, one step at a time. Months into our counseling journey, Dr. Hughes asked a pivotal question: what does success look like for you both? How will you know if this marriage is truly working again? Lisa answered first. Success, for me, is earning Mark's trust back. It's showing him that I'm all in for the long haul, not just with words, but with actions. And it's being the kind of wife and mother our family deserves. Her words were heartfelt, and for the first time, I felt the full weight of her remorse. But Dr. Hughes turned to me next, her expression kind yet probing. "And you, Mark?" I hesitated, the room heavy with the question. "Success," I began, "is feeling like I don't have to look over my shoulder anymore. It's trusting that Lisa's here for the right reasons, and that what we're building is stronger than what we lost." Dr. Hughes nodded. "And do you believe that's possible?" "I think we're getting there," I said honestly. One afternoon, I ran into Sarah at the grocery store. It had been weeks since we'd spoken, and seeing her brought a rush of memories I wasn't ready to confront. "Mark," she said, her voice warm but cautious. "How are you?" "I'm okay," I said, though the word felt insufficient. "How about you?" "Better," she admitted. "The divorce is finalized, and I'm focusing on myself and the kids. It's been freeing, in a way." "I'm glad to hear that," I said, meaning it. As we parted ways, I couldn't help but reflect on how different our paths had been. Sarah had chosen to let go of her marriage, while I had chosen to fight for mine. Neither choice felt easy, but in that moment, I felt certain I'd made the right one. Lisa and I began celebrating the small victories, a dinner that didn't end in tense silence, a family outing filled with laughter, a quiet evening on the couch where we simply enjoyed each other's company. Each moment felt like a piece of the puzzle falling into place. One evening, as we watched Ethan play in the yard, Lisa turned to me. Do you think we'll ever be fully okay? Her question hung in the air, heavy with hope and fear. I took a deep breath, thinking carefully before I answered. I don't think we'll ever be the same, I said honestly. But maybe that's okay. Maybe we can build something better. Her smile was small but genuine, and she reached for my hand. I'd like that. Months turned into a year, and the wounds began to scar over. Lisa's consistent effort, her transparency, and her unwavering commitment to our family proved that she was serious about rebuilding what she had broken. I still had moments of doubt, flashes of anger and sadness that reminded me of how far we'd fallen, but they no longer consumed me. One evening, as we sat together on the porch, Lisa handed me a small box. "What's this?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "Open it," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. Inside was a simple note that read, "I promise to keep choosing us." Tears filled my eyes as I looked at her. "You don't have to prove it anymore," I said softly. "I see it every day." Her smile lit up the night, and in that moment, I felt a fragile yet undeniable sense of peace. Our marriage would never be what it once was, but maybe that was the point. We had faced the worst and come out the other side, not unscathed, but stronger in ways we hadn't expected. The scars of Lisa's betrayal served as a reminder of where we'd been, but they no longer defined us. As we stood together on the porch, watching the stars, I felt a quiet sense of hope. The road ahead was uncertain, but it was ours to navigate, together.